The Cubs beat the Nationals 7-6 at Wrigley Field to cap off their last night game at Wrigley of the season. But in bigger news, Craig Counsell made some comments before the game talking about how the Cubs need to try to start building 90 win and above teams. How are they going to do that? What steps do the Cubs need to take? Plus, Shohei Ohtani made some baseball history last night. That and more on this edition of the Cubs Baseball Channel. Make sure to like and subscribe. Get in that comment section. Let us know how you feel about the Cubs' chances to win 90 games next year or the year after that. But for now, here's your invitation to our show. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Cubs Baseball Channel. My name's Anthony Pasquale. He is Mick Gillespie. You can find me on Twitter at ant_Pasquale3. You can find him at Broadcaster Mick, and you can find our channel on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. So make sure to find us on there. But Mick, Cubs beat the Nationals yesterday 7-6. Ethan Roberts gets the win. Porter Hodge the save. Kind of an up and down game, but a win's a win.
Yeah, look, and Seiya Suzuki with a home run and, another game. And you start looking at his stats, man. He's hitting 280. He's had, with the injuries and everything else, he came out like a ball of fire and then dealt with the injuries. And then now he's, his defense is a little suspect. I think he's going to eventually be like a part-time right fielder and a full-time DH. But, of all the guys on this team, he might have had the best offensive season. And it was a pretty good win for the Cubs. I'd take it.
Yeah, exactly. It was a game that we've seen this Cubs team lose quite a bit this season, but they come out on top. The big reason why is the top of the order was really good. Ian Happ, 3 hits. Dansby Swanson, 3 hits, came around to score 4 times in the ball game. Suzuki had that homer, drove in 2 runs. Bellinger had 2 hits and drove in 3 runs. So when your top of the order accounts for 10 of your 12 hits, you're probably going to win the ball game. And the Cubs did a good job of making sure that the top of the order did some damage. You mentioned Suzuki. He's now got 21 homers on the season to go along with 70 runs driven in. And then Ian Happ's got 25 to go with 85. So 2, pretty good seasons from your starting left and right fielder. You mentioned Suzuki might factor in as a DH long term, but I think those are 2 guys you could definitely take the next step forward with, right?
Well, I don't know. I'm looking at this team and I'm going, yeah, those 2 guys had good offensive numbers. But the problem is that they obviously they were hurt. Ian Happ played most of the season though. Suzuki was out some, but yeah, the numbers look really good. And, well, at least for Suzuki, and you mentioned it yesterday with Happ. It's these games, like he has these big games, right? And then he'll be lost, and then all of a sudden he'll just blow up and put up. His big games have been really big, But for whatever reason, and you mentioned Craig Counsell and his comments, this team, they're on the verge of being a playoff team, and then they're also on the verge of being not so good. Like they're just always teetering. And I don't know how they're going to get better at that. You know what I'm saying? Like, what is the missing thing that they don't have right now? And I'm sure that that Craig Counsell's trying to figure that out. But you know what? At least he's got these 2 guys, and maybe you try to build around those a little bit.
Yeah, we were talking about it a few days ago. A lot of these guys kind of grade above average, but not great, as players. And I think what this team is missing is like a real anchor of that lineup to, you're going to get 30 homers and 100 RBIs from that 4 spot. And then everything else kind of fills in around that. They have a bunch of guys that could be great on any given night, but they could also stink for 3 weeks. And we've seen that happen sometimes all at the same time. And it makes it really difficult to go ahead and win games. Before we get into Counsell's comments, there's one more player I wanted to talk about, just because as you look forward to next season's starting rotation and bullpen, obviously Assad will probably factor in some way to the starting rotation or bullpen. He went 5 innings, allowed 3 runs, struck out 5, still putting together a pretty good season, just struggling to get deep into ball games. But Drew Smyly, it really seems, is kind of limping to the finish line here. Had a really strong season for most of the year, had an ERA in the 2s for almost the entire season. In the last, month or so, 3 weeks plus, it seems like every time he goes out there, he's giving up hard hit balls, coming in late into ball games and giving up leads. I think on the season, he's got 8 losses, and he almost took another one last night. The Cubs obviously came back after it, but he took a blown save. Smyly's probably a guy that will be moving on to a different organization after this season, right?
Yeah, and Kyle Hendricks too. I mean, he says he's going to pitch next year. I can't see a scenario where he comes back with the Cubs. The pitching staff and the bullpen are probably going to be reworked because you have some movement with contracts there that you don't have with the position players. So, and I think that reading the comments, a lot of you guys feel like the team is good, but the bullpen's been bad. But you can't say that and then not look at all the shutouts and then the games where they don't score. Like
sure.
Go back to the World Series winning team. They didn't have a lot of those games. You got to be able to score runs when you're against a good pitching, and good pitching absolutely wipes these guys out. But there's some availability in the pitching slots that I'm sure we're going to see. I wouldn't be surprised if the money that you're paying Smyly probably isn't worth it. Hendricks, I love Kyle, but he's not anywhere close to worth the money he's getting paid. You can go out there and get some pretty good bullpen pieces for the amount of money that you're going to get. When you combine those two guys, I mean, you could put a pretty good back end bullpen together.
Yeah, I think Brett from Bleacher Nation, who's been on the show before, said that what he could foresee with Hendricks is maybe like a league minimum deal with an invite to spring training. And if he impresses there, bring him along. But if he doesn't, then it's, a lot easier to cut ties than it is for a guy making 8 or 10 or 12 million, whatever the case might be. But, pitching the way he has been the last couple of times out, that definitely plays. So I don't think his career is done. It might be in Chicago, but I'm sure he'll find somewhere to pitch just because there's enough good left, I think. But you mentioned the bullpen. There's a lot of moving pieces. I mean, where does Ben Brown factor into the rotation or bullpen once he's healthy? What about a guy like Cade Horton, who's coming off an injury as well? And then guys like Jorge Lopez and Porter Hodge, who have been really good back there. Luke Little, a lefty that has gone through some injuries. So there's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of players whose futures are yet to be decided. And I think probably after the season, we could do a whole episode just talking about who might fit into that bullpen picture. And that's not even talking about who they might go out and get. But I think we can be sure that they are going to go out and do something, because when you have the manager sit before a game and talk about how the team who he left to be with your team is miles ahead of you in the division, that's a message. And I don't know if it's necessarily a shot at Jed Hoyer or just in general disappointment with how this season went. But his exact words were, I think the message sent really is that there's a really big gap. I mean, they're ahead of us by a lot, talking about his former team, the Milwaukee Brewers. And then Craig Counsell also said, we should be trying to be building 90-win teams around here. What are your takes on his comments yesterday?
I like Craig. I mean, we've talked about the season a lot, and I don't think he's perfect, but I think he's a really good manager. They went out and got somebody, but when you're managing with the parts that they give you. So, he can't go out and just create a bullpen, right? And he's been given this team with the long Dansby Swanson contract and some of these other deals that are in place, and he's just got to try to make it work. And it just never felt like that this thing was put together in a way after April that that could sustain. And it was injuries too. It was a lot of injuries, but he's right. The Brewers organization is one where they're not really handcuffed by a lot of these long-term contracts. They develop players like, was it Jackson Cherio, and they let him go out there and play. And the pressure isn't the same in Milwaukee. It's always reminded me of a AAA city, to be honest with you. When you play for the Cubs, it's a big deal every single day. Even if you go to the White Sox, same city, different set of expectations. So playing for the Cubs, you got to be mentally strong, But I like what he said. I think that your expectations when you're the Cubs should be the World Series every single year.
Exactly.
And if it's not, then if I'm the guy that owns it, if I'm the guy that's in charge, I'm getting rid of all those people that's not their expectation, because that's what the fans want. We're tired of being the lovable losers, and to be great, you have to expect to be great. Like the Yankees, like every year they go out and do everything they can to win a World Series. That's why they have 27 of them, and the Cubs have like 3, so I mean, it's like we can get there though.
Yeah. And it's like you look at the Yankees, they're going to win a division, and let's say they lose in the ALCS.
People are pissed.
That's a disappointment. Exactly.
Right.
It shouldn't be, oh, thank God we made it to the playoffs. No, you should be there every single year. And I think Craig believes that. And I also think Jed Hoyer kind of hoped that you take a team that was very close to making the playoffs last year, make a few moves, Michael Busch, Shota Imanaga, and you bring in this brand new manager that's supposed to help you swing those one-run games. But it's hard to forecast the amount of injuries that the Cubs had, 24 blown saves by the end of it. It's the recipe is there to make the playoffs, but they need a few more pieces to get over that hump. And I think Craig is kind of calling for the front office to do that. I also think there's a little bit of an element of a full offseason where Craig isn't just thrown into the position late. Might help him get some more of his guys on the coaching staff and really make it feel like Craig's team. I think like for most of this season, it just felt like Craig took David's spot. But next year it could be Craig's team. So we might see a little bit different.
And also
there.
On the organization too. There was a decade where Theo was running the show, and when you were a pitcher, you never got the pitch. Like they limited the starting pitchers so much because they were afraid that the guys would get hurt. They babied him so much they never developed anything. And Jed Hoyer deserves credit for coming in and letting these guys pitch. And then they've really kind of taken those shackles off this year. And you're seeing starting pitchers in the minor leagues actually get to work more. And I complained about it before, and I'm going to give them a compliment for it now. And I don't know I don't know how all that inner workings happens. I mean, it's the same people, right? But different result. As far as just the philosophy goes. But I feel a lot of that comes from Milwaukee. I mean, you see those guys developing starting pitching, and those pitchers pitch. So the Cubs have some talent in their system, and I'm sure that Craig Counsell, who's one of the things I'm really impressed with him, is that he knows what's going on at different levels, and maybe that can help impact what they did in Milwaukee and kind of take that to the Cubs.
Yeah, and you mix that with like a really good infrastructure, able to get good players to the big leagues quick. And then you mix that in with the amount of money that the Cubs have, the amount of resources that the Cubs have, that they're able to take the really good infrastructure and supplement it with free agent moves and with big trades, stuff that the Brewers can't quite do. And maybe you're able to do that and turn it into a team that can win 90 games, not only once every 100 years, but year after year after year. And I think that could be something that the Cubs try to start building this offseason. I think Craig Counsell is going to be a big voice behind that. But as it stands right now, obviously these numbers are dwindling. We might not even need to keep putting them up, but Cubs are still in second in the NL Central, 7 back in the wild card. It looks like the Mets and Braves have turned that into a 2-horse race for that last spot, with the Diamondbacks faltering a little bit. I could see both the Mets and the Braves getting in, and the Diamondbacks maybe looking
Wouldn't that be
on the outside. We'll have to keep our eyes on that for sure. Cubs 3 games over 500, just a 0.1, just a really small chance to make the playoffs. They're still mathematically in it, but it is certainly not looking pretty. Cubs play the Nats today at Wrigley, 1:20 start. Jameson, Taillon on the bump for the Cubs against former Cub Trevor Williams. So it'll be interesting to watch that matchup and see if J-Mo can get his 11th win of the season. But Mick, before we go, I want to talk about this baseball history that happened yesterday. Shohei Ohtani started the 50-50 club in about the coolest possible way. He stole his 50th base early in the ball game, went on to hit 3 home runs late, finished with 3 homers, 2 doubles, a single, went 6 for 6 with 10 RBIs, 2 steals, and started the 50-50 club, and actually ended the game at 51-51. This guy, I don't think it's a hot take to say it. He's the best baseball player I've ever seen by a mile.
Well, yeah, I mean, like the fact that he can pitch on top of all this.
I know. You're looking at a
It's
guy who
crazy.
is getting paid $700 million a year to be a two-way player. And the first year they knew he wasn't going to be able to pitch, and he's been worth every penny. He's doing things that are unheard of. And I think Justin Steele said it on his podcast. Baseball fans should really look around and appreciate what this guy is doing, because when he's gone, we're going to be like, man, that was awesome.
Yeah, what a ride, right? 50-50. I remember when 30-30 was a thing, then 40-40. And then this guy's just started his own club. So congratulations. Now, I will say this. It's easier to steal now because of the rules, but fun player to watch. I was talking about Mark Whitten today, hard-hitting Mark Whitten, when he had the 4 home runs and the 12 RBIs to tie the record when he was with the Cardinals, beating up on the Reds one night, like in 80s or 90s. I just remember that. But Ohtani, it's more rare to have 10 runs batted in a game than it is to pitch a perfect game. How about that?
Yeah, wow. So he even more history. Starts his own club and drives in 10. I'm going to ask you 2 pieces of baseball trivia here on the show. So Nico Horner yesterday stole his 30th base of the season. He's the first Cub to steal 30 bases in back-to-back seasons since who?
Juan Pierre.
No, that was actually my first guess too. It was in 2000 and 2001, if that helps.
Man, I don't know.
Eric Young Sr.
Oh, wow. I never would have got that.
It was a throw. And then before that, it was both Sandberg and Denier in the 80s, went back-to-back 30.
Rhinos, man, I didn't even think about Rhinos being a speedster. Now, Bobby D, I'm friends with both of those guys. Bobby D, I'll tell you what, man, what a great dude. And someone that I've hung out with before and talked baseball with. He's really fun to be around, and I learned a lot of baseball from him.
And then you were talking about how exclusive the 40-40 club is. There's 6 players in it. It's Jose Canseco, Alex Rodriguez, Barry Bonds, former Cub Alfonso Soriano, Ronald Acuna Jr. last year, and Shohei Ohtani this year. What do all 6 of those players have in common?
Man, outfielders?
Not in the Hall of Fame.
Oh, yeah. How about that?
Obviously, some for different reasons. Shohei will get in. Acuna's probably on track to get into. They're just active players. The other ones involved in cheating. And then Soriano just wasn't quite good enough to get the votes to stay on the ballot. But I think it's interesting. It's one of the most exclusive clubs in the sport, and none of them are Hall of Famers. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy.
Well, that'll do it for this edition of the Cubs Baseball Channel. He's Mick Gillespie. I'm Anthony Pasquale. Thank you guys for joining us. Keep liking and subscribing, getting in that comment section, doing everything you guys do to make this channel such a fun place to talk some Cubs baseball. But for now, we'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Go Cubs.
Go Cubs.